Hey, what's up guys? Threat Level Midnight here, and today we're going to be installing a Dove Dot from Dove Adaptive Mounting Solutions on a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield 9mm. To start, we'll go ahead and disassemble this thing. You can see it's unloaded. It's the California model, so it has the magazine disconnect, so I put the mag in there to drop the striker. So just basic disassembly to get yourself prepped for this thing. Not really a big task here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just drift off that rear sight, so I'll chuck it up in a vise with some soft jaws on it, and I'll be doing this installation without a sight pusher. I do a lot of sight swaps, but not enough for me to spend the money on a sight pusher. If you have one, that's cool, but I think probably most of us, especially you guys that are getting the Dove Dot, probably aren't going to have a sight pusher. So this is how I'll do it with just punches, and it's very doable. But I have a pretty good array of punches that'll be a mix between aluminum, brass, and steel. So on the Smith & Wesson series guns, you have a small set screw that's going to lock that sight into place. But the Smith & Wesson sights are press fit pretty tight into their dovetail mounts. So the set screw is just kind of a safety feature there, just like most pistol sights that are just kind of press fit into their dovetails. So I start off by trying to use an aluminum punch to get this started, and it's just not budging at all. So I always try to use the softest punch I can that I think I need to get the job done. But in this particular instance, the aluminum punch that's kind of cut for drifting dovetails, it works really well for Glock, like plastic sights. But on these really stout M&P sights, it didn't really work. So back the set screw off a little bit more, make sure it's not making any contact, and I just go ahead and switch to a steel punch. And if you're careful, you're not going to mar up the gun or the sights. I haven't had any issues with that. And usually when I'm doing my final touches, or I break it, break the sights loose, then I'll switch back to either a brass or a aluminum punch. So right there, I thought I broke it loose, and switch to a brass punch, and I'll see if I can drift it out there. Still not really budging, so I'll probably switch back to steel for this particular rear sight. And I've had issues with the Smith & Wesson sights in the past too. I swapped out the sights on my Bodyguard 380, and that one was kind of a pain too to install. One of the XS Big Dot, the front sight specifically, that one was really tough. So I'll switch back to the steel punch here and go ahead and get it really started. And if you haven't taken apart an M&P or swapped sights on it before, just be careful when you're drifting your rear sight off, because there's a plate and a spring that puts pressure on your firing pin block, and if you're not careful, it can shoot up when you pull that sight off. So I'm drifting the long way across because it's on the right side of the slide as you look at the back of it. So I'll drift it from left to right. And you can see right here, I'm just going to put my thumb over the little plate. And you can see that there's a small spring, a little plate, and then your firing pin block is right there. So I'm just going to pull that out while we do the rest of this installation and removal of the front sight, because I don't want to lose that little spring or that little plate, and it could vibrate out. I went ahead and just left the firing pin block in there. I wasn't going to take the back plate off the gun. I didn't think that was really necessary for what we were doing here today. So now I'll switch to the front sight, and again I start with the softest punch that I think will do the job. So I started with the aluminum punch, and you can see I'm beating on the thing pretty good, and it's really not moving at all, not even a little bit. And what it does is that it eats up the front of that aluminum punch, and that's okay, because all I do is just grind it and reshape it when I'm done. And that's the whole point of using those softer punches, is that if you're imparting a lot of force onto your gun, it's going to damage the punch before it damages the gun. So, and that's why I use the softer ones. But this one's going to need a steel punch to get it out, because those front sights are notoriously stiff. And as you can see, so were the rear sights. And that's on a handful of Smith & Wesson guns. And I like that about them, because the sights are solid. I've never had a Smith & Wesson sight fall out on me, that's for sure. I mean, maybe someone else has, but me in particular, I haven't had one that's given me any problems whatsoever. So I switched back to the aluminum punch here, now that it got started enough, and pop that sight right off. So now I'll show you what's in the box. Pretty much you can see what's in there is you have your marking that shows what gun it's for, the shield, and this is going to be the night vision set of sights. So the difference on this one between the other Dove Dot, if you guys saw my Glock installation, that one was just a fiber optic front sight, and this one's going to be a night vision, like a tritium night sight up front. It's still just a blacked out rear. That's how the plates come, but it gives you a nice big bold tritium dot up front if your red dot goes down. So in the bag you'll get a little Allen key, your Dove Dot plate, and the little set screw that goes with it. And then there's going to be a couple sets of screws to mount your red dot to the plate with a couple different lengths of screws, I should say. And you can decide which one works best for you. If your red dot can accommodate a smaller screw, then you can use that if it bites. But we'll just go ahead and get this front sight knocked in right here. And again, I'm using a brass punch to start. I'm using the softest punch I have, especially for drifting sights in. But just like I said before, on my Bodyguard 380, the front dovetail in an aftermarket sight, I mean, it was such a tight fit. On my Bodyguard, I even had to grind some of the front sight down on the dovetail portion because it was so tight. But you really need some leverage to get this thing in there. So if you're doing M&Ps and you have a sight pusher, I would definitely recommend it. But I'll show you, this install video isn't very long, and we still accomplished the task here. So I'm just going to flip it around and get a better angle on it, make it a little bit easier to drive that sight in there. And pretty much what we're going for, especially with these, these handgun sights that are more or less backups now, and they're non-adjustable, is we're just going to try to mechanically center them on the gun. So as I'm drifting this thing in, I'm just going to get it as close to center as I possibly can. And it's still a tight fit. This sight was, you saw how much force it took to get the thing out, and I'm able to drift it in with a brass punch, but it's still in there real snug. It's not like it's going to fall out or anything, or at least I don't think it is. We'll see. We'll put it to the test when we hit the range. But basically, when I'm centering this thing, because you have nice flat surfaces, especially on an M&P, I'll just get the calipers out and just make sure I have equal distance from the sight and the edge of the dovetail on both sides. So I take my first measurement and then just run the calipers on the other side and just make sure it's the same thing. And if it's not, then I'll go ahead and make some adjustments. But on this particular instance, it's my first try. It's a little bit off, need to drive it a little further over, which is no big deal. So just go ahead and give it a couple taps with your brass punch and throw the calipers on again. And this method should get you really close, and this is more or less how guns are coming zeroed from factories, is they're just mechanically zeroed. And I don't know what your experience level with handguns is, but for me, I don't know that I've ever tried to drift non-adjustable, or I guess semi non-adjustable handgun sights from the factory, like on a Glock or an M&P. I've never really needed to drift them around. I've always just left them where they're at. So I'll double check here again and see if we're the same, and it looks like it's good now and centered up. And then we can go ahead and get the rear sight installed. So now that we've got our front sight installed, I'm going to go ahead and get the Dove Dot plate itself, and we'll test fit it first to see how the dovetail fits. I've heard of people have it saying they had problems with maybe the Dove Dot fitting too loose in their dovetails. I can tell you that this particular one took a pretty good amount of force to get it in there, which is a good thing. I would much rather have it a little too tight than too loose, and I wouldn't say too tight, but it was certainly snug in there, which is a good thing. And then you still have a set screw to help lock it in too. So when you're reassembling this thing and you're putting your plate on, don't forget that little plate and spring for your firing pin block. What I like to do is just get a punch and push the thing down so it's flush, and then go ahead and start. If you're installing sights, install your rear sight from the close side to your firing pin block, so from the right side, and then go ahead and just push it on and get it started. And see, all I did was put hand pressure on it, and that was enough to hold it down. And then right away, I know I'm going to need a steel punch for this, and it has a nice big striking surface. so I went straight to the steel punch. So as I'm driving the thing in, I'm looking for some reference points where I can get this thing centered up. So this is the California model. It has the loaded chamber indicator that's centered on the slide. So all I'm going to do is just keep drifting this thing until I see the notch of our rear sight in line with that loaded chamber indicator. And this one I didn't have a particularly good area to put calipers on, so I'm going to just do the best that I can. And again, when you're shooting for a mechanical zero, that'll be just fine to accomplish what you need to hit the target. So I'm just going to check it. I'll look at it and see what's how close it is, but you see how it kind of rolled in the vise right there. Every now and then, because we're using punches, you might need to adjust it in the vise because it'll roll a little bit in your soft jaws. But it's really not a hard install, and like I say, you can see how much effort I'm putting into this. This one's a little bit more labor intensive than a Glock, but it's still not a huge process as long as you have a vise. I mean, this task without a vise is going to be really hard. So if you have a benchtop vise, you'll be fine. If not, I mean, I don't know, that'll just be a tough install. So right here, it looks like I got it just about centered. I'll give it a couple more little whacks with the punch and see if I can get it just perfect. Again, we're shooting for as close as we can possibly get it. So once I think it's perfect, I'm just going to pull it out of the vise, give it a look, just kind of look at how much of the edge is overhanging on the slide. And you'll see that this plate, because of the red dots that it's accommodating and the shield being a narrow frame and slide gun, there's just an ever so slight amount of overhang. It's hardly enough to even notice. So if you're wondering if you're throwing this gigantic bulky plate on there, it really doesn't add that much bulk to it. I know everyone wants to get their red dots as low as they can, but this is a pretty good option, especially for the shield. It works pretty well. So I give it a couple of more taps with the punch and the hammer, try to get it more centered up. And you can see here that it's looking pretty darn close, if not, totally perfect. And so once we're satisfied with that, I'm not going to put the set screw in yet. I'm going to go ahead and test out our red dot itself on there and test out the screws before I end up Loctiting the little set screw that goes on the plate. So next thing I'm going to do is just get our red dot out before I start Loctiting things down, and just do a mock-up of it and make sure that the red dot fits. We'll be installing the Wesson EPS carry. I really like the Wessons. I think they've come up in the world quite a darn bit, and I think probably most of you have tried the Wessons out there. I think they're good quality. They have a lot of nice features, and then for the price, I just don't think they can be beat. And the EPS carry is nice because it's one of the, I don't know if there's a smaller closed emitter red dot out there. So it comes with kind of the traditional Wesson accoutrements here, little Wesson tools, the red dot itself, and then a couple little bags of different length screws. Now, I will say that the Wesson mounting screws, they're all Torx, which I love. I think especially these small screws, should be Torx. But the dove dot screws are Allen key. I mean, it's fine because you're not putting a ton of torque on them, but after you Loctite them, if you're ever going to take the thing off, you do run the risk of stripping your screws out. So we just mocked the thing up real quick, and I've heard some people say that, like, oh, my red dot didn't fit on my dove dot, and I don't know the time frame of when people are saying that their red dots didn't fit on, and maybe there's been some changes in the design over the years. But this one dropped right on. It was a perfect fit. So right now I'm just testing the screws that the dove dot comes with. Like I say, it comes with 2 different lengths of screw. I'm going to try to go with the shortest length possible because I don't want the threads to go in too far and end up hitting the top of the slide and not being able to be torqued down all the way, because that would be bad. You'd have a loose red dot at that point. And then you want to make sure that the screws, the short ones, are not too short, so that you're only getting like, 1 or 2 threads in there to cinch the thing down, because then that wouldn't be good either, and you're going to run the risk of them backing off and losing your sight and your screws. So it's kind of a happy medium. If you are unhappy with how many threads you're getting on the small ones, you can always just grind down the longer ones if you need to take a couple threads off if they are touching your slide. But just make sure that you're doing this test fit first. It's kind of an important phase. But now that we're satisfied, I'm going to go ahead and go with the short screws there. And now that we're satisfied with it, I'm going to go ahead and get that teeny little set screw that goes into the dove dot plate, and I'll go ahead and set that in there. And at this point, when I was doing this review, my buddy whose gun this is, he had opened it before I had opened it, and I didn't know, and I thought that set screw had gone missing, or it didn't ship with it. And then he told me that, oh, no, I opened it first, and it's in the box. And so that was a relief, because I thought I was going to have to stop filming right there. I was hoping that it wasn't a mistake and it didn't get shipped. But you can see how small that thing is. Just a teeny tiny little set screw there. And like I say, especially when you're dealing with like a part that reciprocates or has a lot of movement, make sure you're Loctiting your screws. You have to do it. These things, especially slides, they're vibrating so much that it's going to kill you if you don't have any Loctite on there, and you will have things vibrate loose. It's just a fact of life. And even sometimes when you do Loctite things, you can still end up having things walk out on you. But you just set that screw in there. Again, it's an Allen key, so don't over torque it, but it's just going to get some positive pressure in that dovetail, so that it doesn't walk itself off over time. So now I'm just going to go ahead and drop the EPS on there and run these short screws down. And it's as easy as that. I mean, the plate was a perfect fit, just as advertised. And again, Loctite your screws. For the love of God, Loctite your screws, especially on these red dots. They really need them. Especially, these red dots are not getting torqued. I think the torque specs from Wesson are like 13 inch-pounds. And I don't have a torque screwdriver that can fit in these little tiny Allen heads. So I'm just going by feel and making sure I'm not over torquing those things. I'd hate to shear off a screw or end up stripping one of the heads out. So I'm being pretty cautious with how much pressure I'm putting in. Just enough where I feel like it's right around that 13 inch-pound margin there. But more or less, once you run these screws down, it's done. It's set, and you can see that this is a fairly simple installation. This isn't some huge complex process. The toughest part is just overcoming the sights that are pressed into the dovetail. That's really the only thing that's challenging about installing the dove dot, and that's only a M&P specific challenge. The Glocks, if you watch my Glock install video, doing the Glock install was just a total breeze. Super simple, especially drifting out plastic sights, and you just have a little wrench for the front sight. But there it is, installed on the slide. It looks good. It doesn't look too high. The EPS carry is a nice low profile sight. You can see that dot sits right above those irons. Obviously it'll need to be zeroed, so we'll laser bore sight it first and then get it out to the range. But we'll go ahead and just reassemble, and you can see the finished product here. And it's pretty cool. It's nice to have a red dot, especially on these short frame guns. It really gives you an advantage when you have just a short sight radius like that. Putting a red dot on there really enhances your abilities to shoot out at distance, and kind of takes out a lot of margin of error. There's that nice vision, night vision, tritium front sight, and then there's your dot right there. Pretty cool, and I enjoyed the install, and I look forward to shooting these things on the range.